I've gone to have a look in my spare parts section. Other people would call it the shit, but anyway. And look, here's a distributor with a fairly good housing. It's been undercoated, and this actually come off a TED20 that we were restoring, and it went through the flood. And after that, look, we just scrapped it out. It just wasn't worth keeping, it was too far gone. And the housing's okay, the shaft looks about the same order as the old one. What I also found was a top cover that sits inside here. Sits inside there. This one's a little bit tighter, I'll have to have a look why. I was a little bit on the housing here that's... Oh, I think it'll be okay. So yeah, there's a top cover to keep the moisture out, and the rotor. There's a rotor. Sits down on there sort of thing, roughly. Yeah, it comes up through there. So, and that protects your points from moisture and things like that. So we've got one of them to put in, so that'll happen. And I found a bearing that I knew I had tucked away. Now that bearing, the number on it is RLS4-2RS. So RLS4-2RS. It's a sealed bearing, and we're going to leave it sealed. That'll last many, many years sealed. So anyway, I'll strip this housing out and we'll go and clean up, and we'll come back when it's assembly time. We're going to put this bearing on the main shaft. So what we're going to do, might turn him around a bit so you can get a bit of a better picture of what we're doing. Now I've got a 3/8 washer that I'm sitting here because we want to press right close to the shaft, not out wide here. So, and then there's a clamp off the mill. So what will happen is the pins will go down there, and that will support the shaft nicely. Now we have a long socket that sits over the top here, and that locates the bearing and pushes on the inner of the bearing only. And then we should be able to just slide it on like that. That bearing's on as far as it needs to go. Put the washer back in the box, and that's it. We left the bearing sealed. Yes, can only help. Well, we've just pressed the bearing on here on the main distributor shaft, and what I didn't show you before is down the centre here there's a little square of felt, and that just sits down the centre, and when you put a couple of drops of oil down the top here from time to time, well, that lets the oil down through, and it has to soak through the felt to come out here, so you don't get a lot of oil at any one time. You can put a few drips on that, and at this time, this stage in the game, it's good to put a little bit on there, and then that will slowly wick out over time, and that will keep the main distributor shaft, this fella here, your main cam, that'll keep him lubricated so the advance can work. So yeah, just a bit of oil and it's all good there. Now, I've cleaned the housing here up. This is the housing off the other one. Now, the bearing sits down in. We put a bit of lube around there for the bearing, and a bit of lube down the other end for the bush. Also, I didn't point out before that because your distributor goes this way, you'll see a little spiral. Now, I'll see if I can get that to focus on the camera for you. Just down here. And as it turns, any oil that comes up wants to come up, the spiral turns and forces it back down again out of the way. So just be aware of that, it's just a point of interest really. Now the socket that we used to put the top on, we can give that a bit of a, just to make sure the bearing's down in the housing properly. That's turning nice and free. I can't feel any movement in this bush at the bottom at all. When we put a bit of oil around here, I have another thrust, a fibrous thrust to go on there. And this was the original shaft, but I have a better one that's got a nice thick web on it. I'll just give that a bit of a break of lean clean. And I've also realised that I went to find my roll pins and I haven't got a roll pin the right size to hold this in place. So we have the spot mark that we had before. Where is that spot mark? There it is there. So we just line them up. And if we're right, the hole should line up down here. And it does. You can see straight through it. But look, because I haven't got a roll pin, what I'm going to do just to hold the show on the road is pop a couple of zippy ties through here. And look, the only reason is so the shaft doesn't slide out without us knowing about it. So I'll put one there, one come through from the other way. And that is just to hold it together until I can get the correct size pin. So that way nothing can fall out here. Be a bit sloppy this end, but that's we can't do anything about that just at the moment. So with the shaft back in, we can have a look at these weights. I could have put the weights on earlier, I suppose, it doesn't matter. And now with the weights, you'll see on the spring, one hook is often a bit larger than the other. The longer end of the hook on the spring goes over the tower on the weight, on the bob weight. Now one of these didn't have a little washer under it. So what happens then is there's a washer. You make sure you oil that up. And then your little weight goes in the hole closest to the two little spring holes. So that goes in like that. And then you'll see a little groove a little hole there. So that's how the weights go. Right, you have the spring to the inner one, and what happens is later on, this main cam, your main points rotor, as your weights go out, it changes the timing of this fella here. So with that one done, we have a pivot hole here. So we put a bit of oil on the pivot, put a bit of oil in there. That sits like that. At this stage it can be sloppy, because when the top rotor comes in it won't be. We need to, where the little rubbing block, which is this fella here, where that sits on the housing, we put a bit of oil there too. So same procedure with this one. This has a longer end to the hook and a short end to the hook. The longer one came off over the post. Bit of oil. A washer. the bob weight. And that's the heaviest spring. And they'll only go one way on here, you can't bugger this up. I suppose you could, but try hard enough, you can bugger anything up, I suppose. That just slides on there, so see how the weights are just moving onto their own weight there? That's how you want it. So now we put a bit of oil down on the spindle here, a little bit of oil in the holes on those two bob weights, and your main rotor, a bit of oil up the tube and a bit of oil down there, and this is oil just for assembly. You can't put too much here, but it's all below the main driving plate. So what we're looking to do then is just move the weights enough so that the cam actually sits in there. So if you remember before, when the weights come out, it turns the cam. Beautiful. So this little screw, I'll give it a breaker lean bougie. So that little screw with the hole through the centre, it goes down, and it goes down and holds the felt in, and the shoulder on it also holds this cam down onto the main distributor shaft. So we just hold the bottom and just nip that up. Now, to make sure everything's okay still, that this is not binding or something like that, we do the test here again. Look, that's lovely. So we know that with this screw tight, there's still a little bit of end play on the shaft. I think it might be easier to see it this way. What I mean, a little bit of end play there. And that's the main bottom section sorted out. So next up, this is our main base plate, and all we have to do with this one really is just line this hole here up with that hole there, and it sits in place. You can't really go wrong with this part of it. We'll just put the screws in here. Now at this stage we do the screws up, we nip them up, but we don't do them right up tight. So that's just nipped up, and I'm backing him off a turn. And the reason is so I can still move this plate around to line up all the other bolts. Now, this other bolt on this side we can do. This one here we have to put the condenser on before we can tighten that one up. And in the past the condenser was, who knows what it was. Anyway, it wasn't good. Okay, there's the points for the screws. Screws for the points, I should say. I just had a thought there that I might have used the wrong ones, but I'm on track. Vacuum off a turn. Okay, we'll go and find the condenser and the screw, and we'll put this in. Right, once we've got the condenser, it brings us to a problem that we can have sometimes. Now the condenser originally looked just like that. Then from the end of the condenser around to the power screw on the points, it had a solid bar. And what happens over time is someone buys a modern condenser, one that looks like this, they throw that solid bar away. So we're just lucky we have a distributor here that we can take the solid bar off. If you can't do that, making up a nice little wire to go from here with a terminal that pokes on to the back of this bolt, there's nothing wrong with that either, as long as it has a good power supply there. Now with the engine running, if you run a wire there, there's no movement of these parts, so you can do that. So we'll have a look and see which way we go. Well, what I've done, I've set the condenser in. I'll bring you around this way a bit more so I don't go out of frame so often. I've set the condenser in and I've taken this bar out of an old distributor I had here. So what we need to do, that's still loose at the moment so we can move it and help it line up, but I have tightened up these other two screws. Now this screw, I'm taking the screw out of an old distributor too, because the thread on the old one, wherever I've put it, stop looking, I found it. You can see the thread here is quite gnarled up. So we're going to use the best one that we have. Now this little right angle here, that's like a Bakelite insulator, so that the current from the coil doesn't arc out across onto the plate there. And then there's a little insulator. Now the insulator has a little flat on it, and apart from the flat it has a little raised section here, just in there. And if we get this out of the way, we should be able to sneak that screw into the hole there. Now on the insulator it had a flat. On the black insulator there it had a flat. The flat goes to the bottom, and then on the bolt there, that other insulator, the flat piece here, the right angle piece goes to the bottom. And so once we hold that firm in place, this strap now goes under the square bolt head. Now on this side here, you can see the bolt coming out. You can't just put a nut on there or you'll have trouble. So what they have is like a fibre washer, a thick fibre washer. Then there should be like a smaller flat washer, a steel washer, then a spring washer, and then a small nut. So we take that right down just to hold a bit of tension on the bolt for the moment. Those ignition spanners you thought you'd never use, little ones. Well, these aren't ignition spanners anyway, but this is when they come in handy. Okay, so before we tighten that up, we need to loosen that back. I've tightened that up a little bit too much, really. Okay, when we put our contact points on, they should be able to slide in under the square head of that bolt too. So let's do that. Now on the contact points, there's a couple of little washers in here. Or a little washer I should say. Come on out of there. Right, so first up, the fixed terminal. Now never presume these are clean here. They can have a little bit of wax on them out of the box, straight out of the packet. So always give that a bit of a clean up, make sure. I used to rub them on my shirt. Don't you tell my missus that. Wouldn't be game to tell her that now. Okay, so that's the bottom point sits in there like that, so you can run it back and forth. Now this moving point, once again, clean it. You don't know that it hasn't been something, a waxy film or something like that there. Now what they supply is a small fibre washer. So the fibre washer goes down over the peg, and now this moving set of points the strap goes in under the head of the square bolt. And you've got to try and keep them off the floor. Anyway. Oh, so if you haven't dropped something in a job you're not trying. I don't seem to be able to do a job without dropping something. Okay, let's try again. To get that over the cam lobe, we'll just turn that to the flat. Now with the points and the condenser straps both under the head of the square bolt, now we can tighten this screw right up. Okay, so the points are moving. We need to get the screws in there from the points. Now they're flat head screws with a washer underneath, and the washer's for the slot, so it fills the slot here for the adjustment. One there, one down here. Now at this stage, just do them firm and that's all. don't need to have them too tight. Now, because this screw's done up, this bolt here with the strap is done up on both, that means we can now nip this one up. That's in its final resting place. And this fella here, we should be able to just nip that up as well. There's some funny sizes on these things. This is a aftermarket condenser, so I suppose it's some bodgy thread. Originally in Lucas everything was this spanner here, 1/4 or 5/16 AF. Okay, so we have a look at that now. You can see our points open and closing. With our points open like that, now's the time to get our ohms meter going. Now on the ohms meter, running around to 20k. Try and prop that up where you can see what I'm doing. There you go. Put the terminals together. We should have 0 or close to 0. So now, if we take this terminal here, make sure it can't touch the bench, the steel bench, and we test here, to this side of the points. Okay, we're all on 0 again. I'll see if I can, there we go. From this screw to the open point, to the moving point, should be 0. To the fixed point, the reading should be too high. See, when it's too high, it goes to 1. So we have current coming from the bolt to the moving point, but not to the bottom here, or not to the outside surface or anywhere else. So that shows us that our insulation, our little washer under here, under the pivot here, is working. Because yeah, if we go to that side there, it's good, we have continuity. We go to the pin, we haven't. Remember we put that little fibre washer under the moving one? So that should be okay. So I believe on these distributors, I think the points gap was something like 17 thousandths. And I'm certain I have a better pair than this somewhere. 9, 10. $15, $16. $17 there. Look, I'll see, I need to clean these up. I'll see if I can find a better set of feeler gauges before we come and do the points. Okay, back again. We have a feeler gauge. Look, the book says 17. I like to do them at 20. Now, there's a reason I like to do them at 20, and that is when they first get going, you get a little bit of wear on the rotor here, where the points go on there. We haven't lubricated that at all yet, which is something we do need to do. We'll just put a drop of oil for the moment. You don't want to put much lube on here at all, because if you get carried away, it'll fling out onto the points. So what we're looking to do here, to set the points, we bring it right up on top of the cam. You can see the cam here, and see we've got it right at its highest point, so the points are open as far as they can possibly go. And the points are open just here. Now, with your feeler gauge, clean it. There's no use cleaning the points and putting a dirty oily old feeler gauge through the points. So what we need to do is loosen these two screws and move this bottom point until you can just feel resistance. And when you can just feel resistance, I'm sorry you can't see this, I sort of need to get there to once you have a points gap there, look, the book says 17 thou, I go about 20. Do whatever you like. So once we're happy with our gap, we get a screwdriver and we nip them up, the two screws here, we nip them up firm. You don't need to get too excited with doing them firm, they'll be okay. And now once you've set the screws, once again, slide your feeler gauge through. Just to check what you've got. I don't know if you can see that, but when I poke that in, you can just see this top point moving a little bit. So it has moved slightly. I've got some real thin little feeler gauges for this job, but you think I can find them today? There we go. Nip them up, try it again. Well, we're still not right. It's worth taking your time to get this right. How's that? So that's good. You can just feel the drag going through. So when your points are on the top of the lobe, they're open. You can see them drop down and close. Actually, they go this way. When you're looking at the top, they go anti-clockwise. You can see the points opening and closing there. So that's all we need to do there. I always like to put a little drop of oil down in there at this stage. And we've got a little bit of oil. We've already put a little bit of oil on the rotor. Beautiful. Now, this plate here can go on now. Now, I didn't bead blast this because it's got a felt inside there. And you don't want to get sand jammed into that felt. So the felt seals on the shaft here, so you just put a little smear of oil in there just to keep it damp. Now that should just sit in the top there like that. That helps keep any moisture out. So, alright, we do have to deal with this a bit better. You'll notice down the sides here, here's the one I'm looking for. Down the sides there, like moisture could get in here still. That's no good, we can't have that. So we know that that's nice and tight, we've tightened it up. We know it's clearing. There's my right spanner. We know it's clearing, but they used to have just a whole hunk of rubber around the outside there, and that sort of pushed in over. And then you had another, where are we here? Another nut, like a lock nut, coming out here to come out far enough so you could put your terminal from your coil back on here. So what we're going to do, we're going to cut a little bit of fuel hose and pop a bit of fuel hose on there. And the idea of the fuel hose is to fill this gap and make it waterproof and helps insulate through here. So sit tight, I'll go and find the right size hose. Okay, there's a bit of fuel hose I've cut. Now that fuel hose is what? 3/8 ID, I suppose. I've just been trying to trim it up nice and neat if I can. It's probably about 5mm thick, I'd say. So what we do with that, we sit it down over the nut so the nut's inside the fuel hose. And poke it right down in the hole. Make sure it goes right down in. Poke him right down so they go down hard. Now what I like to do is get a little washer. And the washer just sits over the edge there. Then we have one of the screws off the bolt. Right, now that won't go anywhere. It looks insulated, like it is insulated. And so when we bring our wire on from our coil to here, we have another little nut and washer. And that's sitting there waiting to go. Alright, we'll find the rotor, which is here. There's a little tag on the rotor. Inside there you'll see a little tag, and it lines up with this little tag in here. There you go, that's down as far as it can go. We do have the other strap here, but we won't worry about that just yet. I need to find a pin for there, but apart from that, that distributor is ready to put back in the machine. The clamp that we cleaned up. Now when you put this distributor down in on the engine, you can see this terminal easily, and you can bring this bloke up, and this sits right up there, and you can just see there's a little lip there. You can just see it sits up high, a bit higher than the thing, and that gap's taken up by the shim. And the shim, if you look closely, if I can get you to see that, along the top here you can just see some writing. There's a heap of little lines, 1 degree lines, and advance this side and retard, no, it's the other way, retard this side, advance that side. And so once you get this bolted down, this gets bolted onto the little stand. So on the engine, this part there sits on the engine still, and this sits down, and this doesn't move anywhere. But when the distributor goes down through, you can turn the distributor. So this distributor, there's no use putting the cap on yet. We need to see where the rotor is before we put the distributor in. And so now let's put it back on. So look, that'll do for the video on overhauling the distributor. What we'll do with the next video, we'll actually put it in and we'll show you how to line it up and how to get it in the right spot.